Hey guys, in this video I'm going to review the first logic game from the June 2013 LSAT, which is LSAT PrepTest 69. This is the game involving a researcher studying 7 manuscripts. Now I've laid out a bunch of things here, don't worry, I'm going to explain all of them. This game is an ordering game. We know this because no two manuscripts were written at the same time, meaning that they were all written at different times, so there must be an order in which they were written. Now, looking at the rules and thinking about how to diagram this game, I recommend that you diagram this game in a strict ordering style where we have spaces numbered 1 through 7, rather than a relative ordering style where we're simply relating all the variables to each other in a big web. And the reason for that is, looking at the rules here, we see that the rules do not relate all the variables together. We have the first rule relating H, S, and F, the second rule relating P and G, but other than that, the rules don't really connect the variables together too much, so we want to relate the variables instead simply to the spaces themselves overall. Now, I've diagrammed the rules, which I'll explain. Looking at the first rule, H is earlier than S, but later than F. That means that we have H before S, but after F. So H is in the middle of them, giving us the general order F before H before S. They're not necessarily immediately touching, they're just loosely in that order. Now, because of this, we can diagram a few restrictions on the spaces themselves here. We know that H cannot be first, nor can it be last, because it's got to have something coming before and after it. S cannot be in the first two spaces because it's got to have both F and H before it at least. And then we know that F cannot be in the last two spaces because we got to have both H and S after it. We have the rule that G and P have to touch immediately in that order, telling us, among other things, that P cannot be first and G cannot be last, as well as, of course, the knowledge that they must be consecutive in that order. Next, they tell us at least 4 things earlier than L. So I have 4 X's loosely going before L, indicating that there are at least 4 things before L. And since there are 7 spaces total here, that means that L will have to be in either 5, 6, or 7. So I have a little L floating above each of those 3 spaces. Next rule, at least 4 manuscripts later than M, means that there are at least 4 things coming after it. So I have 4 X's loosely going after M, which means that M will have to be in the first 3 spaces somewhere. So similar to the previous rule, I have 3 little M's floating above the first 3 spaces. Then finally, they tell us that H is not 5, so I map that restriction in right here. So now we know that H cannot be 1, 5, or 7, so it will have to be 2, 3, 4, or 6. So I have H's floating above those spaces as well. This little floating trick I use is not absolutely necessary. It's something for you to do if you like. Additionally, all these restrictions on below the spaces are not really necessary either, although I do believe that those are helpful. So anyway, here's our general setup for the game. Now let's get into the specific questions, starting with question number 1. Now, question number 1 is a typical orientation question where we are simply going to take one rule at a time and apply that rule to all 5 choices, looking for violations. This is far more efficient than taking one choice at a time and applying all the rules to that choice. So let's start with the rule, giving us the general order F before H before S. So scanning through the choices here, we see that choice C violates this, having H before F. So C is gone. Other choices are good on this issue, so let's move on to the next one, giving us the GP box consecutive in that order. Scanning for violations there, we see that choice A violates this, having H in between them. That's unacceptable, so A is gone. Next, looking at the rule that there are at least 4 things before L, so L's in either 5, 6, or 7. Scanning through choices there, we see that remaining choices there, we see that D violates this, having L all the way on 1, so that's gone. Looking at the next one with M being in the first 3, with at least 4 things after it. That doesn't get rid of anything remaining. None of the choices at all violated that rule. So now let's move on to the final rule. H is not 5. We see that B has H on 5, so B is gone, leaving E as our answer for number 1. Next, number 2. This question is a general question simply asking us what cannot be third. Well, based on our answer for number 1, choice E, we see that H could be third. So right off the bat, we can eliminate choice D from number 2. Other than that, we don't really have a clear starting point here. Our main diagram did not indicate that there's anything that cannot be third. But, looking through the choices, we can actually kind of figure this out, even though it isn't the easiest question here. What cannot be third? Looking at choice A, mentioning S. If S were third, what would happen? Well, if S were third, we'd have to have F and H coming before it on 1 and 2. And this poses a problem here because now how can we have M in the first 3 spaces? There's just no room for it. So S on 3 is actually impossible, and so A must be our answer for number 2. Now, of course, if you hadn't thought of that, hadn't figured it out, wanted a more efficient way to do this question, I would simply say, deductively, there is not a clear, obvious reason unless you combine the FHS rule with the M rule and kind of figure it out on your own. The other way you could do this question if you were at a loss would be to just skip it, come back to it, then hope that something that you draw or something that comes to light as you're solving 3, 4, and 5 will make number 2 a little bit more obvious because it will give you more valid scenarios to help you eliminate wrong answer choices. So that's another approach that you could take for number 2. But anyway, we have learned that S cannot be on 3, so we can add that deduction to our main diagram and move on. Next, number 3, if H was the next manuscript after M, what could be true? So if we had H as the next one after M, we can combine that with our earlier knowledge that F is before H before S. So S is going to come after this, and F is going to come before this. Now, using this, what could be true? Well, we know that M has to be one of the first 3 due to the rule that at least 4 things come after it. So that gives us 2 different major possibilities here. Either we have MH on 2 and 3, or we have M and H on 3 and 4. Those are the 2 different ways that this can play out. So if M and H were on 2 and 3, that leaves F to go on 1, and then on the bottom possibility here where MH is on 3, 4, we're either going to have F on 1 or we're going to have F on 2. We don't know exactly where it's going to go. Now, moving forward from this, we run into a problem because the GP box here, those guys have to go consecutively, they could not possibly fit on 1 and 2. So for this reason, G and P will have to go on either 5, 6, or 6, 7. 2 different ways that could play out. GP on 5, 6 versus GP on 6, 7, specifically referring to that bottom possibility here where we have MH on 3 and 4. Now, L has to be in the last 3 spaces, so when GP is on 6, 7, L is going to be on 5, and when GP is on 5, 6, L is going to be on 7. Problem is, how could we possibly fit S going after H? There simply isn't any room. S is forced all the way over to be on either 1 or 2, which is too early given that FHS rule. So for that reason, we can infer that MH can never be on 3, 4 when M is the next, M is coming immediately before H. So this possibility is invalid. We're left with only the top possibility where we have FMH on 1, 2, 3. So they're asking us here what could be true. Let's run through the choices. F second, no, F has to be first, so A is gone. G third, no, H is third, so B is gone. H fourth, no, H is on 3, so C is gone. Looking at DP third, no, once again, H is there, so D is gone. Leaving E by elimination, and of course there isn't any reason to think that we could not have S on 4 here. That'd work perfectly fine. Then we could have GPL on 5, 6, and 7, either G5P6L7 or L5G6P7, the same two orderings for them that were proposed that we considered earlier. So E is our answer for number 3. Next, number 4, they ask us a general question: what could not have been 4th? Well, looking back at previous work once again, we know, of course, that S could be 4th based back on question number 1, choice E, as well as what we just learned from question number 3 if we hadn't already known it. So for 2 reasons, we have 2 pieces of evidence telling us that S could be 4th. So for that reason, choice E can be eliminated. Now for the remaining choices, we're going to have to do a little bit of work, trial and error, playing with things. So let's start off with choice A. Could F be 4th? Well, let's put it down and see what happens. If F were on 4, we'd have to have our remaining variables, H and S coming after at some point, as well as L. So let's just throw those down. H has to go on 6 because it cannot go on either 5 or 7 due to things that we've learned earlier. So it's going to go on 6. Then that leaves us with S to go on 7 and L to go on 5, since L has to go in one of the final 3 and S has to go after H specifically. Now we have M, G, and P to go in some combination in 1, 2, and 3. G, P have to touch, so they could be on 2, 3, or 1, 2. M goes in the remaining space. No matter what, we learn that F could be 4th A. Next, looking at B, G on 4, could that work? Well, if G were on 4, that means that we'd have to have P coming immediately after it on 5. Now we have FHS to go in some combination in that general ordering. So we could throw down F on 2, H on 3. M has to be one of the first 3, so M is going to go first. Now we have remaining L and S. They've got to come later because L is in the last 3, and S has to come after H. So here we have a scenario that works, demonstrating that yes, G could be on 4, so B is gone for that reason. Next choice C, H on 4. Looks like it works. Let's try it out. If we put H on 4, what happens? H on 4, we got to have S coming after it at some point. I'll just throw S over there for a second. F coming earlier than it at some point. And we've got to have M coming before it and L coming after it, simply due to the fact that L's in the last 3, M's in the first 3. Problem is, there's no room for the GP box. Those guys have to go consecutively. Where can they go? They're going to be split. One of them is going to go on the first 3, one of them is going to go on the last 3. G would be the first 3, P would be the last 3, of course. Can't possibly fit that box in of those variables going consecutively. So for that reason, H on 4, choice C, is impossible. So C is our answer to number 4. I will take a quick look at choice D, though, with P on 4. If we had P on 4, that forces G to go on 3. And now we have to have, of course, FHS occurring in some way. So I'll put F over on 1. I'll put HS on 6, 7. Remember that H has to go on 6, can't go on either 5 or 7. Then we have L going within the last 3, so it has to go on 5, leaving M to go on 2. This scenario works perfectly fine. Therefore, we have D as possible. P being on 4th is possible, so D is eliminated, leaving C if you didn't get it before. Finally, number 5, if P were before H. I'm leaving 4D's diagram right here just because we're going to want to make use of it to solve number 5. Of course, when you're doing this on the 2-page spread that the LSAT gives you, you would already have this previous work drawn elsewhere, and you'd be able to refer back to it easily. I'm just keeping it up here to keep things simple for you. So P before H happened in 4D. We can make use of that. They're asking us, could be true except. So 4 of these choices could be true, 1 of them cannot. Now, running through the choices here, we actually find that all 4 wrong answer choices occurred in 4D's diagram, what you see in front of you right here. F on 1 works, where we have P before H, so A is gone. G on 3rd works, so B is gone. H on 6 happened as well. L on 7 did not, so we'll leave that alone for now. But then moving on to E, M on 2, that happened as well, so E is gone as well, leaving D by elimination for number 5. Now, if you wanted to know what P before H looks like in combination with the other rules, I'll draw that for you as well. We've got P before H. We know that G goes immediately before P, so I'll put GP as a box consecutive in that order. Then, of course, H goes before S according to the first rule of the game, as well as F before H. So this is what you get when you have H going in the middle of all this stuff effectively. Now, looking at the 4 places that we thought initially that H could go on 2, 3, 4, and 6, we see that H on 2 wouldn't work for this scenario because we have 3 things coming before it. H on 3 would not work because we got to have at least 3 things coming before it. H on 4 is impossible, as we learned from question number 4, so that could actually be eliminated in general now once we know that, leaving H on 6. So if you want to draw a new diagram, given the restriction for number 5, you're going to want to start off with H on 6, period, forcing S on 7, and then the other stuff coming earlier. Of course, L would be 5 as well. So you have a good starting point to move forward from, even if you didn't have 4D's diagram to help you out.